What is going on, investors? Back again. Time to take a look at Snowflake Incorporated, ticker symbol SNOW. This stock obviously has been on a monster rally for a while now since it IPO'd not too long ago. I got a lot of requests on this channel to cover this one. I was waiting until they reported earnings, and they did today in the after hours. Now, the stock is selling off about 3% in the after hours. Not that big, but we are seeing when we jump over the stock chart, this thing is in a nicely formed defined downtrend. So we'll talk about that in a moment, and then we'll jump into the most recent numbers with this one. But things are looking pretty good from the financial side. I think just a ton of earnings, a ton of hype got pulled forward with this one. This is why, in general, I don't typically buy these hype stocks right in the beginning, because there's just this initial wave of hype and euphoria, and typically they come back down. I would say almost, not typically, I would say a large percentage of the time they come back falling down to earth. And so we'll take a look at the numbers here. We've got 3 months ended here, and we've got 9 months ended here. We've got revenue here on the top line. This is certainly like a TAM, T-A-M, total addressable market story, because when you take a look at the market cap, $85 billion market cap. Okay, 48% short interest in this one. Just a ton of people are not believing the story on this one, or in some sense, just believing the story has just gotten way out in front of the stock. And so when we go through these numbers, I want you to keep in mind, we've got an $85 billion market cap on this. Take a look. We grew revenue. These are in thousands. Okay, if they were in millions, it'd be a different story, but these are in thousands. Okay, so we had 73 million in revenue the previous period. That's up about 100%. Okay, that growth obviously is super great. You'd obviously expect that when you got an $85 billion market cap. You better be growing revenue really quickly when you only had $73 million in the previous quarter. So we grew that to $160 million. Cost of revenue is almost inconsequential. This is one of those super high margin business. So that is a combination Wall Street really loves. Okay, they love hyper growth on the top line combined with super low margins. Okay, and these margins look like they're holding true because we doubled the top line and we about doubled our cost of revenue as well. So our gross profit is going to double as well. So we came in at 43, now we're up to about 93. So a little bit more than a double. We see for the 9 months, we went from 177 up to 401 from a gross profit perspective. Really solid. 95 up to 241. We'll give them credit for, since this is 9 month, we can give them credit for one more month. Why don't we just give them credit for 100 million, or maybe even a little more than that? We'll round this up to $250 million of gross profit for 12 months. $85 billion market cap. I'll let you bust out your calculator and see if that's a valuation that makes any sense. At the current moment, it doesn't, but if you can continue this top line growth and this company can stay on the tips of investors' tongues, it certainly will likely continue to go up in the future. Operating expenses, though, not the only story. Went from 75 to 134 on sales and marketing, so they had to spend a bunch of money. Take a look at this. We spent $135 million on sales and marketing to get $160 million in revenue. Take a look here. We spent $75 million in marketing to make $73 million in revenue. That was in the previous period. In the 9 months, it's holding about the same. We spent $325 million to make $401 million in revenue. And so this company is just spending massive amounts of money. Now, probably it's likely a lot of this revenue is recurring. So the sales and marketing expense is kind of an upfront thing. And then you kind of recoup that, as the companies and then the customers of Snowflake renew year after year. Research and development basically tripled. And we also have general administrative actually stayed relatively in line, quite frankly, although we went from 30 up to 53. So we were at 133 up to 262 in terms of total operating expenses. Again, we have a gross profit of 92 that gives us $170 million operating loss, because you take this number minus this number, you get to your operating loss. Our net loss is about the same. So we'll just stay here on the operating side. You see here for the 9 months, we lost $343 million. Again, it's worse than the previous period. Even though we're growing this top line nicely, the margins are absolutely sensational. operational. They are not scaling up the business. Now, what I want to keep in mind here is our total operating expenses came in at 262. I want to zoom down to cash flows because here's the balance sheet. Recently IPO'd company, the balance sheet's almost always going to be absolutely phenomenal. Nobody's buying this for the balance sheet. Okay, we've got tons of cash, very little liabilities. So in essence, this is just about as clean as it gets on the balance sheet. But cash flows, different story. Pull down our net income number. What I wanted to see here, again, we had this 262 in expenses in the quarter. I want to see how much of that is stock-based compensation. So you see it here, it's 119 million. So the vast majority, about half of the expenses on the company's balance sheet is stock-based compensation. So it's just something that you want to keep in mind. When I went through these earnings, we read them like it's cash, but some of it is actually stock-based compensation. Now, from a 3-month perspective, cash flows didn't improve. So this could be also what some investors are looking at. It's certainly what the short sellers are looking at. We had 88 million net loss. That basically doubled to 168. Take a look at our cash flows. They actually didn't improve much at all. We went from 23 million negative cash flows in the previous period, and now we're at about 20 million. So that didn't improve very much at all. Now, from the 9 months, it's improved a little bit. We went from 133 down to 65. And so, it's not really a great story from the cash flow perspective as well. So, this is one of those stocks where I think a lot of the valuation, a lot of the hype has been pulled forward. When you go over to the stock chart, I've got us on a 60-minute time frame. It just gives us more levels to look at, more bars to look at when you've got these recently IPO'd stocks. And you see this one is on a heavy downtrend right now. And in fact, we're underneath this 50-day moving average. When these younger IPO stocks, you could probably bump this to like 20-day moving average or something like that. But I've kept it at 50. And this is way under, it's not way underneath, but we're coming underneath, and this thing looks like it wants to loop over. So we'll see what happens with Snowflake. I'm not surprised it caught a bid right around here, is right about, the stock's actually right about where my cursor is, right at 285. There's some support here. I mean, it's minor, okay? We've got a couple candles here where this is some support at 283. I would not step into this stock until this trend reverses, okay? We are making lower high after lower high after lower high. If you want to think you can come in here and pick tops and bottoms on this thing, go ahead. But the short sellers are in absolute complete control on this one. This is in a very defined downtrend and a down channel. Okay, this thing is just continuing to drop and drop and drop. It's, in my opinion, I would not want to step in front of this one until it starts to settle down. Now, the two things can happen. You can start seeing kind of a wave out at some point. So what could happen, and what you actually hope to happen if you're buying this stock, is you kind of have, eventually you hit bottom somewhere here, you find some support, and then what happens is the stock ends up coming back another direction. And so that's what I would wait, and come back up into this direction. Now, what you want to keep in mind is this downward channel is intact. I would not want to step into this until we broke above this trend line and stayed above it for at least maybe a trading day or two, because you're going to have pump fakes. This was basically a pump fake above this trend line. I mean, this trend line is probably not a perfect trend line, but you see we've peaked up above it a few times and it's just continued to go down in trend. So I would wait until we kind of come above this and make a higher low. Okay, so we're just lower, everything's just lower. Wait till this thing kind of loops around. I don't necessarily think you're going to see a big V-shaped recovery in this one, because it's just had a lot of hype behind it. So that's what I see with this one. Again, if you believe in the long-term story, not at all a bad investment. In my opinion, just understand you've got a massive valuation in this thing, $85 billion, and you have negative cash flows even on doubling revenue, and just the revenue at $160 million. I mean, I don't mean to laugh. You could annualize this out close to $600 million in revenue. And again, the company has an $85 billion valuation. To me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense at the current moment. 5, 10, 15 years down the line, it could. Where the stock will be at that point, what competition will come into play. I'm sure there's more competition coming. Microsoft-backed Snowflake's competitor, Databricks, eyeing 2021 IPO. There's going to be lots of competition in this space here. And so I wouldn't necessarily think that Snowflake's going to gobble up all the market share in this market. So again, I would wait until this one one cools off a little bit, reverses trend before I step in on this one. If you've bought in here at a lower level, you might have to come in here. I think it would be wise to probably average into it again. This level down in here is definitely in play. Anywhere between, we'll call it up to 270 down to the 250 range. In my opinion, the way the stock is trending, these levels are in play. So if you don't want to lose money, I would set a stop loss at some point underneath these shares, because the way this one's trending, this initial IPO price where it kind of went public at is certainly in play with Snowflake. So that's Snowflake for you. Keep an eye on it in the couple quarters ahead, but short sellers are in absolute complete control of this one. We'll see what happens in the future, see if they can turn things around soon. That was Snowflake. Good luck with your investments.